I'd like to call to order the Grand Forks City Planning and Zoning Commission meeting for September 1st, 2021. Roll call.
Arrow. Budke. Here. Kuhn.
Here.
Bunsky.
Here.
Matichak. Reichert.
Here.
Sandy. Here. Schumacher.
Here.
Wasbeck.
Here. We have a quorum. Reading and approval of the minutes from the August 4th, 2021 Commission meeting. Comments, motions, adjustments, amendments. Mr. Reichert?
Did you have something? Move approval.
Sorry. Thank you. We'll go with whoever got that first. Any further discussion on the minutes? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Minutes are recorded as read. Public hearings, final approval petition. Item 3.1.
Sign appeal for Grand Forks Marketplace located at 3601 32nd Avenue South to allow for a 30-foot high commercial center ground monument sign.
Mr. Brooks.
Thank you. I'll quickly talk about the area. This is Grand Forks Marketplace. It's essentially bounded by the interstate down to roughly 36th Avenue South, over to South 34th Street, and then 32nd up on the north. Predominantly Super Target and Lowe's complexes. Currently, what they're allowed for in terms of a commercial center ground monument sign, which we put into place, I want to say it was 5 to 10 years ago, we allowed for up to a 20 by 20 ground monument sign. Up until that point, they were like 8 by 18. And so some of the examples of that, I've predominantly talked about the South Washington Medical Complex. That was, I think, the first one that was put up. Curry did one right across the street from that as well. So they're a little bit larger, a little bit wider. We're seeing other cities go even larger with some of theirs. And so we had a request, and in this case, I think we measured and we're about 70 acres, or, you know, in terms of whether you count the right-of-way with this, it's a pretty significant dominant commercial center area. And on the corner here, right by the Best Buy, they want to put up a larger sign, and it would be 30 foot high. I'll show you the picture that they'd supplied to us. It's 30 foot, 10 inches if you go to the very top of this cap, but for the most part 30 foot, and it would be just under the 20 wide on the entire area. They'd only be able to advertise for the folks who are within that area. So he was showing some examples of tenants that could be on there. He showed Shields. Shields wouldn't be able to be on it because they're not within that area, but he was just doing that for illustrative purposes. And so not all of these tenants are currently in there, but they are in the process of trying to fill up a lot of their areas. They have tenants that are looking. One of the questions that is asked of him, him being the Sterling real estate folks, is what type of signage would I have available to me? And so this is kind of the newer standard that's been done. If you take a look at West Acres and some of the areas down in Fargo, not that we have to do what they do, but they go a little bit larger on some of those areas. We looked at Bismarck as well, West Fargo. They go to a little bit higher. It depends on how close they are to the right-of-way, of course. And then, so there is an idea of, you know, how is this going to fit? How is it going to look in that area as well? So they wouldn't be able to go onto the right-of-way. They'd have to be on the property itself. But this is a piece that they were looking at. In my staff report, I'd mentioned, you know, last month it was asked, when are we going to meet with the sign sub again? This could be potentially, I guess it's the first time you're seeing it in terms of a request for a larger. So I first wanted to get kind of some feedback, find out if there was an appetite to go a little bit bigger with larger commercial areas. And we could certainly deal with that on a sign appeal. if this comes in, I would say is potential that Columbia Mall, Grand Cities Mall, some of these other larger, those are probably the two I'm thinking of that, off the top of my head, that could potentially look at something similar as well. They hadn't gotten to the 20 by 20 yet either, so I'm keeping that in mind, but they're both looking at redevelopments too in the future. So I think at some point in the future, we're going to have some requests. But this is certainly something, from our perspective, they are trying to redevelop, so we did want to get it in front of you and have some discussion. You always have the option of tabling it and kicking it to the sign sub, or we could deal with this request, if you guys are good with this, and then look to change an ordinance, or we could just deny it if that's something that, it's just not something that you guys are interested in. So it's all brand new information. I'll stand for any questions.
I know we got a public hearing, but we'll, just real quick, so staff does recommend approval on this?
Yeah, I think we do need to go to something larger for something that's like a 40-plus or 50-plus acre size. If it was smaller than that, I wouldn't.
So you would do this or larger, the staff would recommend?
Yeah, going up to the size.
And my other quick question is, what's our guarantee? You mentioned that just the businesses in this quadrant would be able to put their name on the sign.
Right.
I don't want to, you're going to look at it two different ways, then you're going to be advertising as advertising, but what's our guarantee that that's going to stay intact and they're going to just be those people and not start selling spaces on the sign for cluttering it up is what my fear would be?
I'll come in and ask for video next.
And, that's coming, just give it a minute.
So, yeah, in terms of those static signs, that is permitted, so that's something that when they do a change out, we get copies of that, it goes into our file, and we have to approve those, they get a permit through our building
But that sounds
inspections.
like the intent. Mr. Reichert?
Yeah, the problem I'm having with this, and I think what your picture on the left shows it the best, right behind it is a 20 by 20 Best Buy sign on the Best Buy building. I mean, these locations already have gigantic signage. So many people don't know that there's a Best Buy there, don't know that there's a Super Target or a Lowe's. I almost would feel better about putting these in a smaller strip mall where you have 20 different businesses and we don't know what they are. Here you've got 5 gigantic businesses with signs that are, huge and color schemes that everybody recognizes, and, so I see where you're coming from. I just don't see the need here, I guess, as much as maybe I would see it somewhere else. But but I can be convinced otherwise too. It just looking at that, it's like, okay, fine, we'll give you this, but take that gigantic Best Buy off of that wall right there then.
Yeah, I think Best Buy probably wouldn't pay to go on this, is my guess. I don't even know if Super Target would, they're not asking for a Super Target. My guess is, as you start to look at some of those other, like Old Navy spaces, the Gordman's area that they're trying to fill, some of those things that are still 30,000 square foot size, I think those are going to be the ones that they're trying to,
And
that
I
would
think we
be.
can fit that in a smaller sign is what I'm saying.
Oh, okay.
For
Mr. Budke?
Yeah, so Ryan, correct me if I'm wrong, there is a sign off of the highway, right, that sort of represents these
Yeah.
properties, right, and is much larger even than we're talking about. Is that
Yeah, so they do get one on the interstate, so I'll go to Google Maps since that can at least show us what it looks like. There is a large on the interstate that they're get only because they're on the interstate.
Right.
Yeah.
And then, just to clarify, you also said that they're allowed, like by right of the ordinance, a 20 by 20 size?
That's correct, yep.
Okay. Yeah, I'll admit that I'm skeptical of this. For those reasons, right, they're already allowed like a very large sign.
There you go.
And also, I think one other issue is, you mentioned like the size of this lot. But like when you look at the plat, right, it's actually like many different plotted, or many different plots that all have like some, I don't know, common developer, I guess, right? They're all owned by Target Corp, I assume?
Managed by
Okay.
Sterling, yep.
Right, but there's also like a city street that goes through there, so it's like it's just a large portion of land that's subdivided even by city streets and right-of-ways, so that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Lenz?
One question I had, is there any infill potential in any of those parking lots? I mean, is this going to be a thing to bring more people or more businesses into this space?
You know, they haven't proposed that to us yet. I mean, they're still trying to fill vacancies within.
Yeah, no, I'm just wondering if this is something leading into that.
I don't believe this is leading into that, because usually what you would see going into the parking lot, and I don't want to speak for them, but you're probably going to see fast food. Typically, you don't see fast food advertised on those signs when I look at other.
The other observation is the surface area of the sign is, you know, about the same square footage as a 20 by 20 sign. So we're you know, kind of in that same ballpark, it's just in a different format, right? The actual sign surface area?
Well, this would be 10 foot wider, or 10 foot higher, I'm sorry.
Right, but this, if you have 20 by 20 sign, you allow that. And
Yeah.
the sign area here is 26 by 15, unless I did my math
Oh.
wrong, it's about the same
Yeah.
surface area.
From a brick standpoint and the look of that, I guess I don't mind this piece, but yeah, if they just did a sign that was, you know, took off the Grand Forks Marketplace and just did this piece, you probably, well, you'd be at 21 feet high to here. And the width is, well, 15 wide. So yeah, if we stripped down the sign, took out the Grand Forks Marketplace, so yeah, just this area here would come, you'd almost be there. You'd be just a foot high.
Pretty close, yeah.
Yep.
That's all I got.
Miss Sandy?
I like it because I think it just kind of, although it's more signage, it cleans it up. And I think if we want new businesses to come to town, they need to be able to advertise. And when I'm in another city, sure, I know where all these things are because I live here. But if I'm in another city shopping, I appreciate these signs because I don't know what's tucked back in there. And I think if I were a business owner, that would be important to me to bring my store to Grand Forks, the maximum amount of exposure, and it's clean. I mean, I think it looks nice. I'd
Yeah.
move approval, but do we have a public?
No, I got to do a public hearing. I'll do that now. Mr. Schumacher?
I would agree with Ms. Sandy that I like the decor and like you said, when the actual signage square footage isn't that much greater, and, you know, the eye appeal is nice the way it's designed, and when you get that big of acreage, you got some stores sitting back off quite a ways and to go to a different city and be informed, and that's what this is also for our visitors, so.
Okay. With that, I'll open the public hearing. Anybody in the audience would like to step up and address item 3.1, please do so at this time. Seeing no stampede, I'll bring it back to the commission. Ms. Sandy? Moved by Ms. Sandy?
I'll second.
Second by Mr. Lunsky. Any further discussion?
Well, we got to think about what 32nd is going to look like as we have 12 of these signs down 32nd. Is that what we want it to look like? I think we should consider maybe even kicking it back to the sign committee to say, what do we want 32nd to look like? Because we approve this, and every track on 32nd is going to come in and ask for the exact same thing. And I don't know how we don't approve those if we approve this one.
Just to comment on that. I hope that everyone comes back and needs a big, huge sign like that, because then we're bringing businesses to town.
Signs don't bring businesses.
Well, it means that we have businesses in town that need the
Well, no, it's going to be existing
signage.
businesses that are going to ask for it.
We've got lots of empty commercial space. So I mean, we'll just agree to disagree, but.
Yeah, and I will say the developer who wasn't able to be here tonight, his comment is that he's trying to market these spaces, they're asking for these. So I know he would say that, so I just want to provide that as just some background as well, so.
Ryan, can you give any idea of, if you're talking minimum 40 to 50 acre parcels or managed groups, how many would that be along the 32nd corridor?
So, yeah, that would be, I'd have to look to see if this one would even fit the 40 acres. I think this one's just under. This would be, I'm sorry, this is the Coles area, I think is just under even the 40 acres. But Sam's Walmart probably is going to be in that area. Columbia Mall certainly would. And I don't know what's going to go into our area up here, which is that vacant space that we commonly refer to as DeSoto. That's a lot of vacant land, so yeah, you're probably looking at 3 or 4. I don't know what's going to go on the west side of the interstate yet, but you could potentially end up with 3 or 4. A lot of them would be eligible for the 20 by 20 though, as well. So there is some other possibilities as well for those existing that we have in code today.
Ms. Sorrell?
Are they able to use, like you said, Shields probably isn't going to be there, obviously, because they're not in that corridor, but do they put like a for rent and a phone number on there then, so it's used as somewhat advertising for, let's just say Catherine's isn't there anymore, so you can...
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, they'll typically use those as placeholders while they wait, yep.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. I see no hands, further discussion. I'll call for a vote. I think we're ready, unless somebody's got an objection to that. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
So I'm, we're good. All right, motion carries. I just wanted to double check. Been a long run. 4-1.
Ordinance to amend zoning map to include Medview PUD Amendment Number 6 for gravel parking lot, time extension located at All True Campus, 900 Duke Drive.
Mr. Budke.
Yeah, I request to be recused from this item. Relates to the All True Hospital project. My employer is the architect of record.
Moved by Mr. Kuhn, second by Ms. Sandy. Thank you very much, you're recused. Feel free to join though. Mr. Brooks.
Okay, so I'll quickly kind of go through where we're at. Here's North Columbia Road, All True Campus, and this is a 2020 photo. In some cases, the lines that we're still platted and doing those things with are still showing up here. So some of this is just still catch up that we're doing, but you can see where the construction was at. And back in 2018, we approved, I want to say it was 2018, but we approved the hospital location in there. So we have some new commissioners here as well, just to give some background there. As part of this construction, all of the majority of the parking lot that was here existing previous, which is in this area here, hopefully everybody can see my cursor, that was parking that's now obviously in the middle of a construction zone. There is significant amount of construction workers that are working in an area like this that need to park. There's equipment, there's material. So the hospital didn't shut down while they were doing all of this. So kind of looking back, why we went to this, there was a need for some temporary employee parking. And so this is the location that was looked at and approved at that time in 2018. It was approved with a time limit, and we'd covered this a bit, I think, I want to say last month or maybe the month before. That expired the end of June, and I can't remember at that time, you know, they were asking for a further time. We kind of wanted it shorter at that time. We had a lot of neighborhood folks out here that were going to be trying to get used to having that across from them, and there was a need to kind of shorten up that timeline as much as possible. COVID obviously happened, it slowed down construction, and so they're back before us asking for an extension. Parking lots are allowed within this area, but really what we're looking at is for the temporary gravel parking lot to extend from the date of 2021 out to 2025 is what the request is.
2025.
2025, yeah. So if I'll pull up the
That's getting old.
ordinance that was in. Here's with the air photo. So the request is in this area here, so
So-
before this hadn't
So
expired.
not to beat a dead horse, right, what, just a background, go back a little to your left on that picture. So we did put that berm in there. That was one of the requirements that we asked for. Has there been any complaints from the neighborhood? I'm just going to bring it up and ask.
I haven't heard any complaints. I know the berm seems lower on one side than it does on the other. I don't know if this was, you know, how much, if they've reached full utilization on this up on the north or half of this. I definitely know that it was utilized here. I happen to enjoy driving down South 34th Street every day to come to work, but the dust pickup and those types of things, anecdotally, to me, driving by, it wasn't as bad as I think our initial concerns. So whatever material they kind of put in and some of those things they looked at, and of course, Altru's here to answer a lot of that, and Josh with JLG. I know that some of the materials they looked at and some of the suggestions that were had, I think the dust wasn't as much of a concern. I didn't see as much of that in terms of complaints. No, I haven't heard it, but there was a lot of people that were contacted as part of this during that process, and a lot of them will be contacted if we approve this, going to final as well. So we'll have to have
And
that
that's why I
public
just-
meeting.
Yeah, I just wanted to just make sure there wasn't a bunch of complaints logged from the neighborhood, because that was one of our concerns, and we knew it was necessary, and we knew it was. So, I mean, 4 years more, right? That's what we're asking for, 2025?
Yeah, August of '25.
Miss Sandy?
How long till the hospital's expected to be complete?
That's better to be answered by,
Please step up to the microphone and address.
Hi, I'm Mark Wayne. I'm the Chief Information Officer and a member of the executive team at Altru. So we're planning on starting construction again this fall. And the new building is expected to be done in that second or third quarter of 2024. And then we're going to demolish the old building. And so, of course, when we do that, we've got to have a lot of space that's blocked off as well. And to have that all complete, it looks like it's going to be about that second or third quarter of 2025.
Okay. Anyone else have any questions? I mean, we're just happy there hasn't been complaints, because
Yeah.
we took a chance on this one a few years ago.
I have just a comment.
Yeah.
Not really a question.
Miss Sandy?
So I drive by that all the time too, and you don't even notice it unless you know it's there, and I think it looks just fine. My only question would be, does it make more sense to maybe do 2 years and have them come back just like this to do 2 more, just to satisfy that it's being maintained the way the neighbors are gonna want it, and I'm not questioning that it will be, but sometimes it's easier to stomach a couple years than 4.
Or is there a policing option maybe of, if it isn't maintained the way, and we get a bunch of complaints, can we bring it back? I hear what Miss Sandy's saying.
I was in the same side as that. I took the liberty of driving through that today, and I would say for being there 3 years, I mean, there's very few weeds growing. I mean, so I would say that it's been a maintained parking lot, very few potholes. You know, for being a really dry summer, it's compact still, so to keep dust down, you know. So as long as there was a maintenance agreement in place that you can go back to if something should, weeds or what, get out of control, to that point, is that in place?
Mr. Brooks?
well, that might be a better question for, you. Are you saying, do they have somebody maintaining it? Because I agree.
Do they have an agreement? Did we put an agreement in place?
Oh, we don't have anything signed. If something gets out of hand, then we would address that just like we would anybody else. But in this case, they've done a very good job of maintaining that, and, you know, in terms of keeping it clear too, especially during some of the, it's hard to remember, but there were some wet times as well where there was lots of rain, and getting through that gravel parking lot was a concern, but they accomplished that very well.
It's been well maintained, no questions asked about that.
And our maintenance department is who kind of does an ongoing monitoring of that, you know, year-round in terms of the snow removal and making sure that, you don't have the dust and you don't have the potholes and that.
Sounds great. Mr. Reichert?
Move approval.
Moved by Mr. Reichert,
Second?
second by Mr. Kuhn. Any further discussion? Seeing no hands, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion unanimously passes. Thank you very much, guys. Item 4.2,
Approval of ordinance to annex Mill Road between North Washington Street and North Columbia Road.
Mr. Brooks.
So this is the one, we didn't have all the materials prior to sending out the packets, so those are on, in front of you. I did have the chance to reach out, normally I don't do this on an individual commissioner, but in this case, Frank Matichek is always our contact with the township up here, which is Faulkner Township. So I had talked to Frank to let him know as well, spoke with him on Friday. This one kind of came together fairly late. So the city's been working on trying to do some improvements of Mill Road. Those improvements have brought up the fact that this piece of roadway from North Columbia Road up to where we connect with North Washington currently was not within city limits. There was currently some unclaimed ownership of that roadway, I guess is the best way to put it. I think at one time what we found is potentially this was old 81, old 81 maybe, going all the way up, and actually if you look at it, it connects all the way up, and Frank actually discussed that with me on the phone.
Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah.
We all know Mayor Faulkner.
But the intent here is to do this, not because we're trying to do a expansion of the city through this area, and we're just doing the right-of-way. We're doing it because of the funding is required for it to be within the city if we're going to use the funds that we're looking to use, and there needs to be ownership of this. To date, in terms of maintenance, the city does come up, and we're maintaining down here because this is all part of city limits as we come up here, and we don't turn around and then go back in terms of plowing and snow. We come and come up to North Washington to do the turnaround. So that's already being done, so it's not going to cost more to maintain this area, and in the process, we're also trying to improve this. We're recommending approval of this, and I do want to warn everybody, and just as a reminder and knowledge for the two new commissioners, annexation one time here, and then it goes twice through city council. So this is kind of a one-time deal that we get to look at these. But that's the intent. A lot of times you'll hear us talk about in the future, when we do annexations, there's potentially other areas that we're grabbing, 140 foot on each side. Is usually our standard. In this case, we're just taking the right-of-way, and so that's why it's just that narrow strip to follow up and come back. So
That'll scare enough people on that
Yeah.
corridor, trust me.
we're very aware that there's going to be a lot of concerns about this as well, like why, what reason is this? In this case, it's actually the city trying to improve the roadway and on an area that's needed. So not looking to do any additional land. If anything, this is just going to be more cost to the city, but we think it's an improvement, so.
Mr. Reichert?
Move approval.
Moved by Mr. Reichert,
Second?
second by Ms. Sandy. Any further discussion? Seeing no hands, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. 4-2 passes unanimously. Item 5.
Okay, item 5 is the land use plan. I'll quickly introduce, so we just had a meeting right before this. Your land use subcommittee members from the planning commission, Steve Wozniak, Alex Reichert, and Jamie Lunsky. We've been meeting every 6 weeks roughly through the summer, and things are going very well. SRF is the lead consultant, Scott Harmstead with SRF, who we've seen here previous, is on a Zoom. So from that, I'll kind of let Scott take it away. I know he has some slides about a 15-minute presentation he thought he could narrow it down despite just coming out of a 1-hour meeting, so we'll see if he's changed that amount. But with that, Scott, I'll kind of turn it over to you, and hopefully Cheryl can connect him to the
He's meeting
screen.
via electronically.
Yeah, yep, sorry, he's via Zoom.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Perfect. Can you see my screen?
No, Cheryl, is it possible to put him up on the screen? Thank you.
Good?
We see you now.
All right. And it says agenda on the screen?
Yes, sir.
All right, I'll get going. I'll try to keep this short. So I'll touch quickly on projections. Projections are important, population projections, because they have to do with how much future space needed to accommodate the growth of the city. I'll touch on some progress to date, or input to date on the 2045, which is the existing future land use plan, or map. And then I'll talk about two alternatives that we discussed today, just earlier. Two alternatives for the 2050 future land use map. Okay, so just earlier, the land use subcommittee, which essentially oversees this project, decided to go with this 1.5% annual growth rate going out to the year 2050. That means an additional over 34,000 people that need to be accommodated through different land uses, primarily residential. So that's an important number, and that's what we'll use, and we'll make sure that the land use is shown account for this much population based on our estimates. Just quick comments we've received on the 2045 land use, and I guess before I touch on those, I should show you the 2045 land use, and I didn't do this earlier, but I thought now, in hindsight, this would be great. So this is your current 2045 future land use plan. The dark line is the city limits, or at least the city limits 5 years ago, 2016. Really quick, for those especially who are new, the yellow is urban or city residential, the red is commercial, the purple on this is mixed use, and the gray on this is industrial. So those are the major colors. The light blue is public. Okay. So in 2045, this is what we're shown. Hopefully you can kind of picture this in your mind, but generally speaking, the idea was back then was for primarily to have industrial growth to the north of the city. There's kind of a mix between thinking it could be residential or industrial to the west of the interstate and south of Gateway or Highway 2. And then generally south residential, following trends that of course we've seen for a long time. So that's what's existing, and I'm going to go back to the comments on that. Residential-wise, just a lot of these are recent trends, right? So recent trends, a lot of the fringe development that's been residential has been higher than what's been traditionally seen, right? Smaller lots, that type of thing. In terms of future residential growth, there's a lot of comments about the need to show more future residential west of I-29, especially to the southwest of the city. A lot of that's because, the flood protection stops development at Merrifield Road to the south. And it's really, you're thinking about 30 years. Within 30 years, the thought is that you would probably hit that flood protection area. I want to mention that we have been reaching out to the school district. We'll continue to do that to coordinate because that's very important for future residential growth. In terms of commercial and mixed use, the comments on that is that let's look at some of our major corridors. You guys just talked about 32nd, we talked about Columbia Mall. So look at the malls for mixed-use opportunities, so residential, commercial opportunities, not just commercial. Look at some of these older corridors, whether it's Gateway or Washington, for redevelopment opportunities that are mixed-use, things like that. One of the terms we applied to those was activation nodes or activation areas. Ways, just the idea is to look for opportunities to really provide more flexibility. We think mixed use provides more flexibility, and I think that's been shown in a lot of places, but more flexibility to respond to whatever the highest and best use is at the time, to respond to market needs best. And also looking at redevelopment opportunities between the university and downtown as well is something that we've looked at and we're asked to look at. But maintaining commercial around the really high traffic locations, whether it's major intersections maybe, or a future interchange. And then industrial. The thoughts on industrial is that industrial should continue to look north, because that's where a lot of the best infrastructure is to support industrial development, but also look at the area generally south of or north of 32nd Avenue and west of 48th Street. So again, we're talking about the west side of I-29 here. And there's a rail spur there that really, its use hasn't been maximized. So continue to look at industrial opportunities in that area. 2045 plan looks at mixed use opportunities in the area. So it's kind of split on what's going to happen there. I think the direction we've received in that area, north of 32nd Avenue generally, and west of 48th Street, is that area is more ideal for industrial. And you've already seen some industrial development in that area that's been quite positive. This is just a snippet from the University Avenue Corridor Study, and it does identify, it's hard to see here, but it does identify some potential redevelopment areas. We reflected those in one of our alternatives for the 2050 future land use. And then there were some concepts as well in the MPO's transit development plan that looked at potential redevelopment along Dyke Avenue between the university and downtown. So we also looked at that area as a potential redevelopment area as well. So I'm going to bring up those alternative maps here for 2050. Okay, so we had to figure out a way to make these alternatives different in some way. And so actually, I'll take a step back. So we have two alternative future land use maps. The idea is that we try to make them different so we can get good constructive comments on these maps from you, from our land use subcommittee, and from the public. Get comments from all those parties, and then what you end up with at the end of the day is some type of blend between the two. So what we have here, this first alternative is more focusing on outward growth. If you remember from the last time I visited with you about a month ago, we have already looked into infrastructure capabilities that exist and other community services that exist, like where are your grocery stores, your parks, all these different things, all the different types of infrastructure. So a lot of this is based off of that analysis. So alternative one is looking at outward growth primarily. It's looking at additional outward growth of industrial to the north of the city, essentially between Washington Street, the interstate, and the airport property, and then all the way up to the sewer lagoons north of the community. It looks at extensive residential to the west of I-29, generally from where the 17th Avenue South alignment is all the way down to south of where the 47th Avenue South alignment would be. Would be a pretty extensive area of residential. And then the idea is to just build out residential to the south of the community, all the way to Merrifield, to the area with flood protection. So that's what that does. We looked at the numbers and even building out, so to get to 2050, even if you develop all the way south to the area of flood protection, you still need to go somewhere else. So that's why we're looking west of the interstate. There has to be at some point residential growth somewhere west of the interstate. It's very limited what you can do near the airport and Highway 2 because of airport restrictions. So that's why the southwest is an area where we thought at some point, it might be 20 years in the future, but at some point residential development needs to go somewhere in that area. So that's, and then this one does not look at changing much within the city. In terms of infill, it doesn't change much there. Alternative 2 does. Alternative 2 looks more inward, and not as much in terms of development on the fringe. Alternative 2, getting back to some of those comments that I was discussing earlier about mixed use along existing corridors within the city, that's what this does. It identifies the malls as mixed use opportunities in the long term. It looks at 42nd Street as a huge opportunity for mixed use, residential commercial opportunities. It looks at University Avenue. It looks at Gateway Drive, South Washington, all those areas as mixed use opportunities where we can hopefully increase activity and greater land value in those areas. So these rectangular boxes you're seeing, we're calling those are these activity corridors where we want to focus activity and focus on redevelopment opportunities. The little circles are ideas of general areas where we want to focus redevelopment opportunities as well. For example, the Grand Cities Mall is identified. So an interesting number, when we look at what this type of mixed use redevelopment would look like in terms of additional population, or the amount of additional population versus the other alternative I just showed you, you're looking at about just less than 1,500 more people that could be accommodated within the city because of these mixed use opportunities that we're showing here. But again, even that, with the need for 35,000 people in 30 years, at some point you have to grow out to the fringe, on the fringe. So that's why we continue to show development on the fringe as well. You can only do so much within the city. You can only have so much density. So those are the two alternatives. I think the comment I'm looking for is, we'd like to bring these alternatives to the public as well. I think the comment we're looking for, and the comment we've already gotten from some of you before this meeting was, on these alternatives, what needs to be changed? Do these look right? Are these good to push forward to the public? And some of the discussion, or most of the discussion was around what is the appropriate location of an interchange? Should we consider development further south of a future 47th Avenue interchange to maybe provide the opportunity for an interchange further south? So that was some of the discussion we've already had, and there's some back and forth on that. But I'll stop right there, try to keep my talking short, and encourage some comments.
Thank you. We didn't get to this second alternative in our meeting, and I think that really does a nice job of accomplishing a lot of what we talked about, which is getting rid of that residential west of the interstate and north of 32nd. I think that is, you did a great job putting industrial in there, and I just think we take that industrial all the way to the dike, or to the flood protection. Now, how do you envision, or how does it happen? How does one put industrial next to residential?
What's the buffer?
Yeah, what's the buffer, like on 32nd now,
Yeah.
on alternative 2, where you have industrial to the north and residential to the south? Should we put some commercial in there or something? I mean, it seems like nobody's going to want to have even an apartment abutting an industrial. Can you talk to me a little bit about
There's a number of ways to do that. So part of it is where you do that change from industrial to residential. A lot of the times, if it's on a major corridor, that may be probably would be 4 lanes in the long term. That buffer alone will help. A lot of times you will get, and the zoning would dictate this, but you would get, and the market drives this as well, you get higher density, right?
Right.
Closer to industrial as well. So I think those two things combined account for a buffer. So a bigger road and higher density residential. The other idea is mixed use. I think mixed use is a good idea too, because it provides that flexibility. If the market wants commercial, it can account for that. If it wants residential, it can account for that. And the idea for mixed use here isn't all vertical mixed use. It could be horizontal mixed use, so residential, commercial, horizontally spaced, not just vertically stacked.
And then to Earl's comment that he made, and I'm just kind of jumping around because the people weren't in the meeting, but I went back and looked at the 2045 plan at Earl's suggestion, and the point that we're making is, if you look at the 2045 plan, which is east of Washington, south between north of 12th there. See how there's just that half section in there? That's what we were saying, is the city has already moved to within half a mile of that. And we really think that the natural growth of the city is going to be continuing to go south.
Right where your star is for the school, Scott, on 62nd.
Yeah.
I'm just talking about, sorry, Al.
Yeah, no, for sure.
Right there to the south of that is, and that whole area is what Alex is talking about, and that's what we were talking about in our meeting, that we've already exceeded the growth in the 2045 plan, or 2045 plan.
Well, we're within half a mile of it.
Yeah. So it's showing out of that, so.
And we've moved that mile before it, we moved in 10 years, right, Ryan?
I can go back to their photo, yeah. Well, we went 55th to, 55th to 62nd in about 10 years. TJ's addition came in about then. We could look through their photos, but yeah, it was about 55th down to 62nd, which is a half mile. In a relatively quick time. I mean, that doesn't seem like, but it is.
And there's no natural barrier to stop us from going. I mean, that's where it's going,
Yeah, the natural barrier becomes the flood protection system down at Merrifield.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, to Alex's point on buffering the industrial from the residential, I think that, and commercial is very important. You know, we're dealing with something right now on decibel levels. A road isn't going to do it. You know, we're looking at an owner putting in a 30-foot concrete wall to try to stop it. So we really got to look at that buffer zone between, if we're going to put residential up to that
What do we
industrial.
put, like contractor shops? I mean, that's industrial, right? We could buffer it with some contractor shops.
Something.
Yeah, and our code already requires, if it is industrial next to residential, there is code requirements in terms of space and landscaping that's required. And in some cases, that includes fences.
But your industrial will probably come in first on that stuff out there, so.
And then it's that type of industrial that we see, you know, you aren't necessarily always dealing with manufacturing that has loud noise.
But you don't want to know, and you don't want to handcuff yourself to it, right?
Yeah.
If it's industrial, open it up for anything.
And then this is that plan for the future. If it doesn't or needs to be something else to smooth in the transition in between, we deal with those. Those are the types of things that we deal with on rezonings. And so this is that future piece, and then that immediate piece is the rezonings, and then the PUD concepts that we'll look at. So I want to make sure I layer that into that.
there's that other piece of it.
Yeah, and I would add too on that real quick, since you're mentioning it, Ryan, that there's, the other part of this plan is the policy piece of it. So we definitely have the intent of just having policy to address the buffering issue as well, and which then that would speak to the regulations. So if there's more we want to do with the regulations in the long term, with that, to help with the buffering, we can do that.
Doing a great job, Scott, I appreciate it.
James, anything you wanted to add as a subcommittee member before everybody else gets a shot at it? Giving you full respect today.
Yeah, the only other thing I was looking at is the commercial space from 47th down to 12th Avenue along the interstate. I don't know if we should reserve any more of that, to buffer the interstate from the residents. And I'm not sure if the demand will be there for that or not.
Yeah, just some background on when we put this together. We were worried about long-term commercial demand. That's why you're not seeing, the extent of what you see, for example, along 32nd. We just didn't know if it was there, and
Do we do some mixed use along the interstate, or just leave that
that's
option open?
what that in 2045, that was the idea, and that's what was provided, was mixed use along the interstate. So that's an option, yeah. We could do that.
Mr. L?
Tell if I'm on it, there we go. Alex, I agree with you on being careful about butting up residential, and I'll just use the Demers corridor where like Wells Concrete used to be, sort of butts up right against to Congressional. While those lots are quite long, you also have the railroad tracks there, which would be the same as here, and then butting up to to the industrial piece. So I think being very careful about how that's all planned out is probably a good idea. So.
Very good. Any other comments on it? Mr. Budke?
We talked, or it was mentioned a few times, the flood protection. I would benefit anyway from like having that overlaid on here. You mentioned Merrifield Road, and I think that's labeled on here as 12th Avenue Northeast. I understand that that's like the southern boundary, but I assume that there's...
Yeah, it's in blue on there, but it's really hard to see.
It's that blue line, if you look.
This one here?
Yeah. No, it's this one. Where's that other one? That's the flood protection coming in. Here is it coming around 62nd or 47th and up. That's what I see it as, Mr. Budke.
Okay.
Kind of like that, to the west of the interstate, I don't have that with me. I don't know, Ryan, if you are more clear on west of the interstate, what happens there, but.
Well, the interstate becomes the buffer, so you're on the
Okay.
east side, Bearfield ties into the interstate.
Yeah.
And then the interstate, we're just capturing that overland flooding. So that little hook that you see at about 47th, that's where it's picking up the farm, yeah, that's probably, that's picking up the farm field drainage essentially, funnels it there, and then that takes it up. That's that English coulee diversion that you see picked up on the west side of town and then around the north end Walmart.
Okay.
And then actually up, it enters into the red up by Frank's Place on 40th Avenue North.
Okay. That's helpful.
I see what you mean too, though. The dike, isn't really shown on the dike road on Belmont.
We can add that, and that would certainly help. We have other maps too that have been shown before, but we can certainly incorporate it in here so it's clear.
So just another couple of thoughts. I believe the city's talked in the whole like bridge saga, right? The Merrifield. Merrifield Road, right? Like that same location or that same street. That's what we're talking about for like the future like high and dry agricultural type bridge. Is that correct?
That's what's been discussed. I know Earl isn't here with the MPO, but
Yep.
I believe the discussion is high. I haven't heard for sure if that's high and dry, but that is a bridge location. And the thought is bypass around the city.
Okay. And then just like my one last thought while looking through here, like on this first map, you've got like the, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, and that includes like a great amount of land that's south of that Merrifield Road, which would be outside of the flood protection. And it just makes me think back to our annexation worksheet, right? And the way that the points are awarded. most of these points, when these are, as a policy, are being evaluated, come down to the tiers. I've spoken critically of that before, and I feel like when we're talking about going beyond flood protection, that's not just a situation where, you know, it's not just a neutral decision at that point, right? Like there's some pretty big impacts, and I would think that a score sheet might even have like negative points or something like that. So just a thought.
That, and Commissioner Bucky, that is one of our tasks to retool that worksheet. And you can jump into, Ryan, if I'm wrong, but from what I remember, what I recollect. And so, yeah, we will definitely look at that as part of that task.
Yeah, that was not, that's 100% city funded, so, yeah, that was a separate task that the city said, let's take a look at this individually. So as we start to wind up with the land use plan, I think your intent, if I'm not mistaken, Scott, was probably early 22, we would get into that.
Yeah, late this year or early next year, correct.
Yeah.
Mr. Akert?
Hey, Scott, I just want to clarify that I'm thinking about this right. And this is something that took me years to figure out, is when we do this plan, we're not trying to figure out policy so much with this plan as just say what we think the reality is going to be. And then the people that make the policy can look at it and say, this is what it's going to look like. And I think sometimes we do it backwards. We try and pigeonhole where where developers are going to develop by where we want it to go, as opposed to saying, this is where we're pretty sure development is going to be, now plan around that. Am I thinking about that right, or was I totally confused?
Well, I think it's the former. I think it's really our best guess at this point in time of where development is most likely to go. And the idea is that the idea is to encourage development to be within those areas. However, again, you've probably heard this term. It's a livable it's a living document. So if there are changes that make sense, and this happens quite a lot, if there are changes that make sense, then this can certainly be amended.
Well,
Before the 5 years are up, this map can be amended, is what I mean. So and then, of course, depending on infrastructure availability and all these other factors we look at.
and the city's going to go where it goes. I mean, who would have thought that the wet side of the dike over by Adams area in there in Shady Ridge completely filled in before anything else? And that was all on the wrong side of the dike. That completely filled in before anything else in the whole neighborhood. So Grand Forks is going to kind of, that's why I said some of this stuff we were trying to explain to Earl and Scott and explain how things happen here. That we've watched over time and time.
Yeah, and that's exactly right. Conditions change, and the idea is that this will respond, and this needs to respond to those changing conditions. But still, the main idea here is that it supports zoning decisions that the city makes.
Well, Scott, can we have a number of maps? One that says, this is where we think it's going to grow, and this is where we probably can't. Oh, Scott, can we have like a couple of maps? One to say, this is where we think it's going to grow in reality, and this is where we want it to grow? You know, reflecting the difference between the two, then we as commissioners can sit down and say, we're trying to discourage this and make this happen.
We could certainly show, we've done this before, I mean, we could certainly show where we think growth trends are going. And you mean regardless of flood protection or infrastructure? Mm-hmm. Okay, I mean, we could show that regardless of those things. And then, but I really think, and I think Earl and Brian would agree with me that this map here, one that's adopted, needs to be what is where we really want it to go, because of infrastructure availability that we see now.
Sure.
And other constraints we see now.
Okay. Yeah, and
yes, we can do that.
I
Yes.
don't want you to do that because it would be a lot of work. So I just was, as I was saying it, I thought.
My thought, how we've done that before, just real quick, is we've shown like, it could be just with arrows, it could be really simple. where is development pressure going, and I know there's some areas, like you're saying, I've seen that are outside of flood protection, for example, so, I mean, we could show that just with arrows and things.
I'm just hoping we can reflect both sides of, that's what the argument seems to be, where we think it's actually going to go and where we want it to go. And it might simplify things a little bit if both people feel like their point of view is being represented.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay.
That's your lawyer side just kicked in, both people being represented. Mr. Bulkey, please.
So just to flesh this out a bit more. So I guess I was a little surprised, Alex, to hear you characterize it that way, right? I guess I would expect this plan and this body to be thinking about the policy implications, but am I understanding that that's
100%,
not what we're doing?
100% we should be, but this document, as I understand it, is where it's going, not where we want it to go. Where we,
Oh, no, I'm sorry, maybe you misheard me. This document is supposed to be where you want it to go. That is the intent behind this.
Where we want it to go.
Because it's connected, it's supposed to have a consistent connection to your development regulations, your land development code. And that's all about how you want things to happen.
But this document is then used to tell us where bridges are going to go, where overpasses are going to go, that sort of thing. And just because we want it to go somewhere, we tried that. We tried saying we want it to go west of the interstate, and they start looking at bridges into East Grand Forks on Elks Drive because the city's not going to go that far south. And so I think our politicians and our decision makers are using this document and making poor decisions because it doesn't reflect reality, it reflects what we want to happen. And that's where I think we run into the problem, and that's why I want this document to represent reality, and then we can plan based on what the current trend, if you want to stop that trend from happening, at least you know what that trend is. And now, if you say, I want to stop that arc of going south because of, we go outside flood protection, we go outside of our lift stations, we go outside of our infrastructure, now we can talk about that. But if we're already saying the city's going to stop there, then we'll never talk about it. And we'll start, and we'll keep talking for 30 years about building a bridge at 32nd and Elks and those places where we all know it's never going to be built. So that's my soapbox. I'm sorry. Thank you.
No, great comments. I love the thought process on everybody.
There's one on flood protection, and you can get outside of the flood protection area and take elevations, and there's areas that are, to Wozniak's point on Adams, I mean, that's above probably the 500-year flood. So as you look at that, we use that as a constraint sometimes, but until elevations are known, and there's probably development areas out there that are above 500-year floodplains or wherever the levels need to be. Has that been looked at or addressed in for potentials outside of the floodplain or protection?
What I will say is there is one area just south of Adams Drive that can be serviced with, or it does have city utilities available to it, because we've already gone over, maybe I'll go to the map. We've got his map up, but yeah, right there, thank you. Yeah, he's pointing out the small area there, John. So that area there, we actually have city services that are leading over there to Shady Ridge Court. Yep. That's an area that's outside flood protection that we've looked at potentially serving and having development. I'm not aware of another area, although the only other way, we're not looking at bringing city services outside of the flood protection in any other areas for additional development that I'm aware of.
At this point?
At this point, yeah. Now, is it possible? Yeah, that would be, I guess, a policy change if we started looking at that.
But we are west of the interstate, right?
Well, I would say that they're still in the flood protection area west of the...
Because of that,
the
diversion?
Yeah, the Cooley diversion. It's really tough to identify where in the southwest corner where those areas meet. So it's relatively open, but for sure that flood protection line is definitely, that's a hard line of,
Meaningful.
yeah, thank you, yeah, that's the best way to put it in terms of tiering the system.
Mr. Lonsky?
I guess I'd really like to go back and look at the map that the Corps used when they picked this line for where the flood protection was.
No, there's a whole nother night, Mr. Lonsky.
Anyways, I'll leave it at that.
Good comment. Okay, I mean, Scott, do you have anything else for us? I'm not seeing many more hands pop up, but again, we're kind of beating on them a little bit, but I said it in our end of our our meeting here before this. These guys are doing a terrific job. They've really put some thought into this. It seems like they've put enough research to know our city and really impressed us on the committee so far. So again, just
Thanks.
hoping to say that.
Okay, I do have just a little bit more to kind of finish this off. We'll take those comments, we'll make those adjustments, and then bring forward these two alternatives to the public. So, and speaking of the public, on the 16th is, unfortunately, it's part of the potato bowl, but it's no longer a French fry feed. I don't know what it's called now, but it's a Thursday night. They're having potato chips and hot dogs. So unfortunately, no fries. Very bummed. But we'll be there, and we'll have a tent. And they're still going to provide activities for kids. So we're going to have a tent that has activities for kids to engage in, and get their input and thoughts on what their favorite places are in the city. So that should be fun. And then we'll have a presentation. It's not going to be a live presentation, just a recorded presentation that will discuss these alternative maps and solicit, try to get input from people through an online, a way of doing it online. So that'll come out at about the same time as the French Fry Feed event on the 16th this month. So just wanted to say that, and I'm done.
All right, thank you very much, Scott. I really
Thanks.
appreciate it, and again, nice job.
Thank you.
Other business, Mr. Brooks?
I was just going to ask
Ms.
Scott,
Hofer?
is the online mapping tool still available, or do we close that down now?
You know, we're supposed to close it down. That's what I was directed, but we have not closed it down as of today, as of the 1st of this month here.
Okay.
So it's still available, but
If
yeah, I was
anybody wants that link,
directed.
just let us know and we can hook you up with that. But I would think at least by the end of this week, we need to
We're
really...
going to change it though, Ryan. The idea is to change it to get input on the alternatives.
Sure, absolutely.
So, yeah,
I'm just thinking this phase, so thanks.
okay, yeah.
Okay. Just on the last note, I just want to thank everybody for being here and putting in their time. I think this is becoming a very well-rounded committee, and your time is appreciated by everyone. So thank you for that. And with that, anybody want to make a motion? Yeah. Miss Sandy? Second by Mr. Reichert. All those in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Meeting adjourned.
John and Jenny, we are going to have some planning commissioner training. We're working with North Dakota Planning Association, so they'll have those available.